It's a good question. Who is going to be the team most likely to challenge Georgia coming into the 2022 season in the SEC East? Obviously, we think that it will likely be Alabama in the SEC, but you got to get to Atlanta first. And that's one of the big things with the Dogs that you're going to have to pay attention to if you're Kirby Smart and all of them. Obviously, they'll be dealing with day to day, but which program is best positioned right now to take on the Dogs, to beat Georgia, get to Atlanta, and possibly get to the playoff? I mean, I guess you'd be at that point if you were one of those teams, unless you had multiple losses. But the biggest challenger to me is probably Tennessee. And let's just go through all of them. But I would start with the Vols and take a look at everybody else. I'm saying Tennessee. Now that I say it out loud, it might be Kentucky. It might be Kentucky, but I think it's probably one of those two. Before I go on too far and too long, I want to make sure that y'all know I got a special promotion for this book this week only. This is a very rare thing, okay? So stick with me just for a second here. If you order Dogstruction right now between April 9th, 2021 at 11:59 a.m., excuse me, p.m., your book could very well be the one that's signed by Stetson Bennett. Now, there's only a few of these in the world, and he signed them a week ago in Gwinnett County at the fairgrounds during an event that I was helping out with a little bit. And so I've got that book. One of the books that I send out is going to be the book that has Stetson Bennett's autograph. So if you order between now and then, you stand a whatever chance to get it. But if you don't, then you will not get that book. You got to order between now and April 9th, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. When you look at the past few years, Florida has been the team that has been best positioned to stop the Dogs. They beat Georgia in 2020, but it's hard to imagine that Billy Napier and company will be in a position in 2022 to get the job done. All right. It's also hard to believe that Vanderbilt will be in a position to get the job done. They're just so far behind. They went 2-10 last year. Those were the two teams that finished in second to last and last place in the East, the Florida Gators. So it's hard for me to think that Billy Napier will correct all of the problems that Florida's got right now. A losing season, 6-7, going 2-6, and losing to everybody, I think, but Tennessee in the East. Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Those, I believe, were Florida's only Eastern wins, or only wins in the SEC at all. Was a 38-14 win over the Vols. Just a strange victory. I mean, how is Tennessee still losing to Florida the way they did last year, and then a 42-0 loss to for Vanderbilt to Florida? Then you look at the rest of the East. The team that's been doing it the most consistent lately has been Kentucky. Now, when I say consistent, I mean over the last 4 years, 18 on. So in two of those years, Kentucky has had 10 win seasons. They've ranked in the top 15 in those two seasons. They've also had a couple of not great years. In 2019, Kentucky was 8-5, which is not bad. And then they had a 5-6 season in 2000. So, one losing season out of four for Kentucky, that's amazing. Tennessee, obviously in 2020, was 3-7. This past year, they were 7-6, which is hard to believe that I would say that they would be the team to watch. But we're not talking about the team that's going to win it. We're talking about the team to watch. In 2019, Tennessee 8-5. 2018, obviously, a rough year for the Vols at 5-7. So the two teams that are not Kentucky and Tennessee in this, and that could make the most noise and would be least expected, are Carolina and Mizzou. Now, Missouri, I think there's a lot of hope at Missouri that the Tigers will come a long way in a short amount of time under Drinkowitz. They were 6-7 this past year. They need a playmaking quarterback. They do not have that. South Carolina does. And if, like, for instance, if JT Daniels were to go to Missouri, that would put Missouri right in the middle of things in terms of who is the biggest challenger. Carolina at 7-6 has still got some problems, but they've come a long way. I'm not sure I felt like this would happen with Shane Beamer, but they did come what I would call a long way in a short amount of time. The loss to Missouri last year for South Carolina, not a great loss. But other than that, they closed the season pretty well. They beat North Carolina by 17. Actually, the loss to Clemson was probably their worst performance at the end of the season. Their last 5 games, they go 3-2, but they get beat by 30 by their arch rival. Now, that's not going to work. Like, at some stage, that's not going to work for those guys. But the only 3 teams that really outclassed South Carolina were Georgia by, what was that, 27, Clemson by 30, and then Texas A&M by 30. So those 3 teams, they just really piled on South Carolina. The loss to Kentucky was by 6. Tennessee beat them up pretty good too, but that game I feel like was halfway close at the half, and they just kind of got zoomed out of the ball game. But the way Carolina closed the season, I can assure you there's a lot of perceived momentum in Columbia. They're really good at that, but there's a lot of perceived momentum. Again, if you want to buy DAWGSTRUCTION, I'd really appreciate it. That's great. This is the week to do it because I've got an autographed copy from Stetson Bennett that I had signed a week ago. I'm sending that out to someone who gets the book between now and October 9th at 11:59 p.m. If you don't get the book before then, you're not eligible for it. I'm not going to send it to you. It'll be a random draw. I don't care who gets it. So now is the time to get it. Can the Gators figure this thing out? I don't know. I mean, they're the group that has, to me, of the so-called contenders, because Vanderbilt's really not a contender. They probably have the farthest to go. South Carolina, they got Spencer Rattler, they got a quarterback. Missouri, Tennessee, they got a quarterback. Kentucky, they got quarterbacks. All those guys got quarterbacks. Now, I'm not saying, and we don't know what Spencer Rattler's going to be like against Georgia, but the other 2, they did play against Georgia, and it was fine. I think it was adequate. Or, in Tennessee's case, I think their quarterback played pretty well for Georgia, and they still lost by whatever the score was, a lot. If you're Georgia, where are the road games? Okay, you got to go to Kentucky. That's not a lot of fun. You got to go to South Carolina. Everybody knows that that's a snake pit. Is that the most challenging game on hand for Georgia? I don't know, but that's one to watch. That's a little bit like the Auburn game this past year. Now, we've not talked about Mississippi State. I don't really know what Mississippi State's going to do, but we're not talking about the West. In terms of which is the toughest away game, you got some to pick from. Probably not at Missouri of the 4 true away games. But I think, to me, it's either Tennessee or Kentucky seem the most ready. South Carolina probably right after that, with Florida and Missouri fighting for the position after that. But truthfully, I'm just not sure I see any of these teams surviving their schedule and their gauntlet that they have to deal with in terms of getting to Atlanta. Because beating Georgia is one thing, but I'm going to go through the teams real quick and talk about it. I'm not going to talk about Vanderbilt. There's no point. Missouri, they're going to have to play at Auburn. They'll have all the Eastern schools. They play at Auburn, and then they'll also play Arkansas. Well, they're probably not winning both of those games. I don't know if they'll win one. Florida, they got LSU this year as usual, and they play at Texas A&M. Good luck. Tennessee, Alabama, and LSU. At least one of those games is in Tennessee, but those are back-to-back games in a 3-week period. excuse me, in a 4-week period, Tennessee plays Florida, week off, at LSU, Alabama. They need to win one of those games, though. They need to win one of those games for sure. The end of Tennessee's schedule is a little bit different, but I will say they play Kentucky and Georgia in back-to-back games. That's not a lot of fun. Kentucky, they play, the usual gauntlet, but they got to go to Mississippi. That's a tricky one, and they host Mississippi State, their crossover. I don't know if they survive that. And then, of course, South Carolina, the geniuses of the world for getting Texas A&M swapped with Arkansas, because God knows you definitely want the team from Texas on your schedule as the permanent rival. Congratulations to Carolina for making that decision. But they get to play at Arkansas week 2. So those are their back-to-back. Those are their Western schools. They do play Georgia and Arkansas back-to-back. That is a challenge. I mean, they're going to play Georgia State to open, which, they should win that game, you would think. But Georgia State has proven to be challenging for SEC teams. Auburn. You go to Arkansas, you host Georgia the week later. That's going to be a tough gauntlet for Carolina. Of course, they play at Kentucky, and then they get a week off before A&M, Missouri, at Vanderbilt. They have the end of their season is at Florida, home Tennessee, at Clemson. So, it's going to be challenging for Carolina, and they're going to have to gussy up for the end of that season. It's going to be challenging for anybody to get past Georgia in the East, but it's something we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about who can get past the Dogs in the SEC here soon. But DAWGSTRUCTION with Stetson's autograph. One of the people who orders this week is going to get it. Make sure you're in that pot. We'll see you on the website. Click the link down below.